Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Perrier conjures a certain image, those green, pear-shaped glass bottles with that golden cap. For more than a century, the brand of French mineral water has built up a reputation.
The champagne of table waters is how they like to frame it.
Bloomberg's Dasha Afanasieva covers European consumer goods companies, including Nestlé, which owns Perrier.
It's the kind of thing that you can find in the most expensive hotels all over the world. I was just in India and all the fancy hotels had these tiny bottles of Perrier. So it's really retained this prestige and this elite status as far as mineral waters go.
But today, Perrier is facing several challenges. There's heightened scrutiny, problems posed by climate change, and fallout from an investigation by French regulators that could ding its image.
It's a report from the previous year, but it was leaked in April, says that there's fecal matter, there's forever chemicals, and there's pesticides. And that includes pesticides that were sort of banned 2 decades ago.
Regulators only found trace amounts of these pollutants. But Dasha says the report and other issues facing the brand put it at a tricky crossroads.
So it's a really bad look. And there was never a suggestion that the waters were unsafe to drink. It's more a question of what do you produce and what do you tell consumers about what it is that you're selling them.
I'm David Gura, and this is The Big Take from Bloomberg News. Today on the show, how pollutants ended up in a well used by one of the world's best-known brands of bottled water. Can Perrier's reputation survive? And is its broader business sustainable enough to weather other storms? What is it that makes Perrier water Perrier water? What is it about it that makes it stand out?
So it's very much about where it is sourced. And the source is in the south of France, in this very quite rural area. There's not too much going on there.
It's just outside of Vergès, a town in southern France, not too far from the Mediterranean, with a few thousand residents.
It's just quite sleepy and quiet. And the idea is that it allows this water to be sourced from really pristine sources. It's supposed to be completely unspoilt.
Dasha says Perrier keeps the exact location of each well secret, but the water has been a draw for thousands of years.
Since 58 BC, that's when the Romans first built a bath there. And then in the 19th century, Napoleon signed a decree for this water to be exploited and for there to be a spa on the site. English nobility would come and visit and stay in the spa and drink this water to sort of rejuvenate. It was a wellness fad back in the 19th century. And eventually, someone called St. John Harmsworth bought this site and started bottling the water but closed down the spa. So it's got this incredibly rich history that sort of focuses on this heritage of something being healthy, of rich people enjoying it, of it being its elite status.
To this day, all Perrier water must come from that same sought-after source. And because it's sold as natural mineral water, that's what it says on the label, it's also subject to strict regulation.
You can do some very basic filtering, but it pretty much has to come to the consumer, the actual water as you found it. You can carbonate it, but you're not supposed to disinfect the water in any way, because really what's the point of having this heritage water, all of these mineral properties, if you're going to then boil it?
So how did contaminants make it into Perrier's water? The company says it has to do with the weather.
They blamed it on torrential rain that had disturbed the balance of the different pools of water underground.
Perrier pumps its water from an aquifer more than 500 feet below the Earth's surface, where it's already been naturally filtered and protected from contaminants that can affect pools that aren't as deep. But Dasha says intense rain can saturate the local water system, and that can cause different pools to mix.
A shallow one can come into contact with a much deeper one, which has been, protected by clay and rock. So you're getting your water from the deeper one, but actually it's got shallower water mixed in, and that can cause contamination.
And this isn't the first time Perrier has run into a contamination problem.
1990, which was before Nestlé even owned Perrier, there were traces of benzene found in the water, and benzene's a carcinogen. And the company was forced to, or chose to do, one of the biggest recalls in the world. It was 160 million bottles in 120 countries. And that really created a massive hit to its reputation.
Decades later, Nestlé was accused of using illegal filtration methods like activated charcoal and UV filtering in Perrier's production process. Both steps are against the rules for anything labeled as natural mineral water in France. The company settled the case, but it was still a big hit to Perrier's image.
So it got sued by Consumer Watchdog, and there was another lawsuit where it's had to pay a fine, a €2 million fine, but it didn't actually admit wrongdoing in that. And Foodwatch is suing again because this consumer group thinks they shouldn't have been let off the hook.
This issue has not gone away. Perrier faces similar allegations in other countries.
So they kind of really have to watch out for the reputational damage of that. I don't think typically the fines are very big. €2 million isn't very much at all for such a massive company, but it's being in the headlines for misleading consumers that's potentially really damaging. You need trust when you're asking people to eat and drink your stuff.
Nestlé Waters France declined to comment on the lawsuit, but reaffirmed that the safety and quality of Perrier have always been guaranteed, and that all its brands now comply with French rules. The company told Bloomberg, quote, "We have invested significantly and will continue to do so to protect this unique heritage and ensure its future."
They had a new boss come in 2020, and she was told, we've been doing this filtering. So then she started a modernization plan, a multi-year plan, which cost €150 million. And that included sort of re-cleaning all of the pipes and having a system for doing that so that contaminants don't get in. It also included introducing automation into the factories so that they're super high tech and so that humans don't actually touch the water or touch even the products a lot of the time.
But Dasha says revamping the production process is only part of the solution.
It also has a whole program to reduce pesticide use in the area. So it allows winemakers to make wine on its land, so long as they do it organically.
Nestlé is encouraging more environmentally friendly farming practices near Perrier's source. But France has been one of the world's biggest users of pesticides, and the country is still struggling to deal with the legacy of that.
Arguably, there's not an awful lot Nestlé can do about it. But I guess the issue is, does mineral water still have integrity when we've been using pesticides for so long?
The other big challenge for Perrier, as it fights to keep its product and its image intact, a rapidly changing climate. That's after the break. Bloomberg's Dasha Afanasieva has been reporting on Perrier, the French luxury bottled water brand, and the challenges it faces from recent scandals to increased scrutiny. Another big one is climate change.
So in this region, there's many more droughts and also instances of torrential rain that are impacting Perrier. So with the droughts, it's obvious, you're running out of water, and if you can't kind of take water out when there's not enough for other uses.
It's the same problem the company pointed to as a reason for contamination from pesticides and fecal matter, torrential rain.
If that happens more and more often, then even if you're testing loads, you can catch that and you can prevent that water going to market. But it will, and Nestlé admits that it will in the future cause fluctuations in its production levels.
Perrier has turned to other strategies to keep consumers interested and to grow the brand. Earlier this year, it introduced a new sparkling water called Maison Perrier. Its ad campaign is fronted by Emily in Paris actor Lily Collins. The water comes from the same source in France, but it's not branded as a natural mineral water, so it's not subject to the same stringent regulations.
So they're not going to run into problems with filtering when they're not really allowed to with this drink, and they're hoping that that's going to be 40% of Perrier revenue. So that's great because there's all this water that they wouldn't have had a use for that they can actually just filter and put into Maison Perrier. But there are questions over why a water that isn't even a mineral water needs to travel from south of France all the way to New York or California to appeal to sort of, millennial Americans who maybe don't drink alcohol. So it's a great marketing ploy, but is it really consistent with corporate efforts to sort of bring down carbon emissions and to have products travel fewer miles?
Perrier also sells water in plastic bottles, which Dasha says raises other concerns.
Nestlé's solution is having 50% recycled content by 2025, which, again, there are issues with that because, plastic leaches into water, and the more you recycle it, the greater the risks that even more types of chemicals leach into the water. But Nestlé is still kind of a proponent of this, idea that recycling is a lot of the solution. And they've also, to be fair to them, they've also reduced the quantity of plastic that they use. So they do things like redesign packaging, redesign bottles in their mineral waters.
Nestlé says it's doing everything it can to shrink its environmental footprint. It's pushing for more bottle return programs and reducing its use of non-recycled plastics. Dasha, with all of these issues surrounding Perrier right now, where does this leave its parent company, Nestlé?
I mean, look, water isn't a huge chunk of Nestlé revenue. I think it's about 3.5%. So this isn't a situation where, Nestlé's biggest business is under threat at all. But it's more a question of, has this company been run effectively? Is it biting off more than it can chew? Are its operations not as smooth as they could be? So it raises those kinds of questions. And for investors who are concerned about ESG, they do worry about, is Nestlé being a good corporate citizen, and is it, walking the walk in terms of ESG? But investors can look to this story as an example of maybe mistakes, maybe mistrust, maybe scrutiny that it could have done without.
This is The Big Take from Bloomberg News. I'm David Gura. This episode was produced by David Fox. It was edited by Aaron Edwards and Alyssa McDonald. It was mixed by Alex Segura. It was fact-checked by Adriana Tapia. Our senior producer is Naomi Shavin. Our senior editor is Elizabeth Ponso. Our executive producer is Nicole Beamsterboer. Sage Bauman is Bloomberg's head of podcasts. If you like this episode, make sure to subscribe and review The Big Take wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps people find the show. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.